No matter how many times I think I've gone through it, I keep getting comments from people saying, so what is your plan for accomplishing this repatriation? How are you going to solve the problems of multiculturalism? Now, it could be that I just haven't gone through it as often as I like to think I have, or it could be the old advertiser's rule of 7, where you have to show people an advert 7 times before they even notice it. So what I'd like to do is go through it again and make it nice and clear with a nice little checklist. Now, I'll give you an example of the kind of comments I'm talking about. So here we are. This is on a recent video that I did. While I admire your work in fighting the planning applications, I have serious reservations about your philosophy on the problem as a whole. How will you repatriate those that have been born here who have probably never even been to where their parents or grandparents came from? I think that's a pretty good question. I think that gives the lie to a lot of the normal repatriation programs where you try to repatriate people who say, well, I was born here, I've never been to Pakistan or Afghanistan. I think it's simpler than that. I think if we just let things work out, but then they'll probably work out towards a pretty comprehensive repatriation program. But the important thing is how to make it work more humanely, more smoothly, more successfully and effectively. And to that end, I've come up with this little list. Call this my 10-point plan. It's not really a plan. I'm not King Canute. I can't do all of these things. The first one is economic breakdown. I can't break down the economy. I don't have any power to do that. Whether I spend or don't spend or save my money, it won't make any difference. So, but this is the sequence of events that I think will happen that we should prepare for. Most of them pretty unpalatable and horrible, I have to say. But think of them as being like a bunch of dominoes. Once the first one falls, the other ones fall. And I'll show you this just because it's satisfying. Oh, isn't that nice? Yes. So what I want to do, let me go back to that list. Hold on. Think of my list of events as being like that string of dominoes. The first one, the crucial one, being economic breakdown. That is the first one. Now, I think that economic breakdown will come from either of two causes. The first one might be simply under the weight of highly unproductive, hostile and unassimilable mass immigration. I think that on its own could collapse the economy and collapse the authority of the state. I think it's much more likely, though, to be under the weight of debt, the debt bubble bursting, imploding and simply crashing the economy, and then creating economic breakdown that way. And let me just show you what I'm referring to there. This is a site called US Debt Clock. If I zoom out a little bit, you should be able to see the whole thing. It's an interesting little site, but the bit I want to focus on here is just US national debt. If you see that figure, that's the national debt, just the central government. That is at nearly $30.5 trillion. I don't know how much $30.5 trillion is. What I know is that apparently US GDP is about $23.5 trillion. So that means their national debt is about 1 1/3, nearly 1 1/3 times GDP. And that's just at national government level. There's the reason I focus on America is because America has the world's reserve currency. So if America goes down, it drags the rest of the world down with it. But Western governments, including America, including Britain especially, have become experts at stuffing debt into every corner and cranny. So you have debt at national government level, at local government level, at city government level, in pension funds, schools, hospitals, student debt, universities, all over the place. And to give you an example of that, let me show you this, just a very small example. I don't have time here to go through where all the debt is and to analyse it in detail. It is historically unprecedented. We are broker than anyone has ever been in history, certainly broker than we've ever been. Now, I want to show you this one. This is just one local authority. There are, I think, about 330 or 333 local authorities at this level in the UK. I think there's about 25 or 30 county councils as well. This is just one of those 333. That's Slough. Now, Slough Borough Council faces asset sell-off after bankruptcy. Slough is on the Thames corridor close to London. I would have thought that's one of the last places that would go bankrupt, but no. If you read here, Slough Borough Council was forced to declare bankruptcy last year, having accrued 760 million in borrowing debt. That's 750 million just for Slough. So you multiply that across the country. Fortunately, the economy hasn't broken down, so Slough has some valuable properties and it's able to sell off its properties. Had the wider economy broken down, there's no way Slough would have been able to sell off its properties at a profit and cover its debts. Those debts would have fallen over and, well, again, the domino analogy would have knocked over another domino, say the bank or the lender that Slough Borough Council owed the money to. But that's just one example. That is how in debt we are. And those debts will, at some stage, they're rising fast, very fast, particularly at a central government level. Those debts, when interest rates rise, as they're rising, as inflation is rising, as that inexorable move upward in interest rates comes, those debts will become impossible to pay the interest on, impossible to renew and roll over, and the economy will break down. It's not just the states, it's also businesses, corporate bonds, housing debt, individual consumer debt, credit card debt everywhere in the economy. If the interest rates go up to normal levels, that bursts and the economy just falls over. Okay, so back to my list. What I want to come back to in a little while is where I think we are on the road towards that first domino, economic breakdown. Okay, but what I think is likely to happen is we will see the economy breaking down. And if the economy breaks down, then I think that will drag down the state. The state will go broke. If the economy goes broke, the state will go broke. The reason the state will go broke is because the state won't be able to collect taxes from a bankrupt economy. And its own debts will make the state broke anyway. So even, it wouldn't be able to afford to pay out welfare even if it could gather taxes, because no one will work for the state, because the state, all its debts will be called in and the state will simply be bankrupt, like Slough Council was, only without the ability to sell off valuable properties. So if the state goes broke, that means the welfare state. The next domino is the welfare state going broke. Now this seems to be one that people cannot get. I think people have a blind spot here. But it is said, I've heard it said, no one knows, did Voltaire say it, did George Orwell say it, did some 1930s politician say it, that if you want to know who's got power, then look at who you can't criticise. People say it's ethnic minorities or Jewish people. No, if I were to mention Jewish people, I get loads of comments in the comments section. But when I mention the welfare state going down, it is met with frozen silence. It hardly ever gets any comment at all, except to say that I am a bad guy for even mentioning it, that I will be responsible for collapsing the welfare state if it happens, simply because I mention it. What that proves to me is that religion is alive and well in this country, that religion is really, and we have the Holy Trinity, that the Holy Trinity consists of God the Father, that is the state, up above, all-powerful, sorting everything out, organising, arranging, ordering everything. God the Son, that is the welfare state, moving amongst us, performing miracles, healing us. And God the Holy Spirit, and that's the spirit of democracy, moving around us, vitalising us, just like the Holy Spirit. That is the religion of the day. And mentioning the breakdown of the welfare state is a little bit like saying that God the Son was not going to come to earth, or God the Son would die before he got crucified. That's a little bit like a medieval heretic would be blamed for killing God by denying the existence of God. That's the impression I get whenever I suggest that I think the welfare state is likely to break down. I think maybe it may be something to do with that old inside of your head, outside of your head problem, which is actually quite simple. Everything that's between my fingers, that's inside my head. Outside my head is everything else. So I hope that's helpful. Right. Now, the welfare state going broke. Let me try and break that down. If or break down the connection between domino number 2 and domino number 3. Now, if the state goes broke, that means the state doesn't have any money. If the state doesn't have any money, that means that the state doesn't have any money to pay to you or me, to other people. If the state doesn't have any money to pay to you, me, or to other people, the state can't pay welfare to you, me, or other people. If the state can't pay welfare to you, me, or other people, that means the welfare state has gone broke. If the state can't even pay the wages of the people who are employed to pay out that money to you, me, and other people, then the welfare state has broken down. So I don't really know how to put it a lot more clearly, but I will try. I would say, imagine that this is Sooty and this is Sweep. And Sooty has a gun, and every so often Sooty goes out into society and he waves his gun at people and he gets them to give him money, and he keeps some of it, and every once a week he comes over to Sweep and he gives Sweep some money. Okay, so Sooty and Sweep. And then one day the economy breaks down and Sooty goes out with his gun, and it doesn't matter how much he waves his gun around at people, they haven't got any money to give him, so he can't collect any money to give to Sweep. So Sweep gets cross about this, and Sweep then goes to visit Sooty in Sooty's office, and Sooty doesn't answer the door, so Sweep goes in, drags Sooty out, strings him over a lamppost, and sets fire to his corpse. Okay, so that is the explanation. If the state goes broke, the state can't pay any money. Incidentally, if Sooty does that, he might feel good for a couple of days, but shortly after that he'll realise, my goodness, I've strung Sooty over a lamppost. There's no way Sooty can pay me any welfare now. So that is a way of making it clear. If Sooty can't collect any money to pay to Sweep, Sweep isn't going to get any money from Sooty. Okay, I hope I've made myself clear. Thank you. Now, you may think I'm being obnoxious because I have contempt for people who claim welfare. No, not at all. There's a gentleman here. He left a comment on one of the videos I did. Seriously, Gavin, you have an obsession, mate. 3% of the welfare bill goes on the unemployed, and there are 1.5 million people unemployed because of mass immigration plus deindustrialisation. You cannot, in capitals, live the life of Riley on £100 a week, universal credit, or £76 a week, JSA. Mate, you are a bigot against those who you believe are lesser than you. No, I'm not being obnoxious because I want to express contempt for people who are claiming welfare. I am being obnoxious because I want to express contempt for people who who refuse to face what I think is the unavoidable prospect of the welfare state breaking down. I don't have contempt for the little old lady who is in a care home, and I certainly don't have contempt for the prospects she faces if the welfare state goes down. What happens to her? Is she turfed out on the street to die? Also, no matter how much I might try to tell myself that I'm independent, if I cut my finger, I go to the government-paid doctor and I expect him to do something about it. If I get burgled, I go to the government-paid police force and I expect them to do something about it. If I get on my push bike, I go down a road which is paved by the government. So I'm dependent on government spending like other people are. The contempt I have, the irritation and disrespect I have is for people who refuse to face that prospect, and that prospect is real and getting realer with every passing day. And we people face far worse from the refusal to face up to the prospect of the welfare state breaking down than you do from some on the contempt of some obnoxious online nobody like me trying to point out aggressively that potential reality. It is far worse for you if you refuse to face up to that. Then you really are exposed, and things could get bad for you if you haven't anticipated it. And that is why I am pointing it out. Call it tough love if you like. Okay, the next domino is in the domino chain. So the welfare state goes broke. If the welfare state goes broke, the panic, fear and anger, as well as the logical or the reasoning idea that the state has failed to keep its side of the bargain, that those things will motivate people simply to reject the authority of the state. The state will break down. If the welfare state breaks down, the state authority itself will break down, partly because it will have no money to pay forces of law and order, to pay policemen. I don't know what I mean by the welfare state breaking down. It's not just the rent check, the rent subsidy check doesn't land on your mat once a week, or the dole check doesn't land on your mat. It means that the roads don't get paved. It means that the schools shut. It means that the local authority simply shuts. It means that police can only make money by extorting on-the-spot traffic fines from passing motorists. It means that if you go to hospital, say you go to the doctor with hemorrhoids, he'll say, right, before you drop your trousers, please hand over 100 quid. I'm not looking at your hemorrhoids before you've paid me that 100 quid. Or if you go for an operation in a hospital, they might say, we want $2,000 out of you before we operate on your bunions. So it is not nice. Don't underestimate what that might mean. I certainly don't. On the back of that, you'll get a lot of anger, a lot of fear, and a rejection of whatever little bit of state authority remains. And the state authority itself in those circumstances will break down. If the state authority breaks down, then law breaks down, because it is the state that imposes law at the moment, and that is a big problem. A lot of people, I think, maybe some Antifa people, maybe some anti-racist people might think, yes, that's great, particularly in America. If you look at Seattle Chaz, the autonomous zone in Seattle, then, or Capitol Hill autonomous zone, that was supposed to be a lawless area, and look what happened. It wasn't lawless because it was surrounded. It was right in the middle of a state system that is still functioning. But even then, it got bad enough. And that is the problem when law goes down. What immediately happens is crime rates rocket. The evidence from Latin America is that when state authorities break down, immediately you can tell when they've broken down, because people no longer stop their cars at traffic lights, because that's where the carjackers are. House burglars, or the people who break into your shed every now and again, they graduate up to home invaders who wait for you to come home, kick in your door, hit you over the head and ask you where the money is. Policemen might find they can make more money kidnapping and ransoming people than they can as an unpaid policeman. It is bad. It makes people very insecure very fast, because there is such a rise in crime. And if the law does break down because the state has broken down, we will discover fast that law is a primal human need after food and shelter. Without it, the big ones eat the little ones. You're not safe with anyone, and everyone lives in poverty because you can't enforce contracts. So people don't enter into deals, don't enter into business, and you stay unemployed and in poverty. It is not nice. Law is a primal human need. In those circumstances, the next domino, number 6, that is, I think people will seek law privately. Again, this is something else that I have trouble communicating to people, which is that if the state has broken down and can't impose law, then the state can't get up a dictatorship. If the state has broken down, the state remains broken down. You can't say, well, if the state breaks down, there'll be a military dictatorship. No, the state has broken down. People will seek to meet their need for law any way they can, and I think in those circumstances people will do it privately. There are various ways that people can submit to private forms of law. People will need to show that they are subject to an enforceable code of law in order to be able to live amongst other people safely, to live in neighbourhoods, so people will accept them, knowing that they don't have a terrible criminal living near them, knowing that if you commit a crime, you agree to be punished for it. Also, we need to submit ourselves to a system of law in order to be able to earn a living, to be able to trade. Otherwise, no one will enter into a contract because that contract can't be enforced against you. There's no court that people can then go to in order to make sure you perform your end of the deal. If you are subject to an enforceable code of law, you will say, listen, I am safe to deal with, because because you can sue me if I don't keep up my end of the deal. And so people will seek law privately. Of the three methods, the three methods that spring to mind are methods that the English in particular really don't like. The first one is military dictatorship. The British don't like that. We never have. We've always had a fear of standing armies because of that. Oliver Cromwell didn't really want to be a military dictator. He didn't like the position he was in. We've never liked military dictatorships. It's just not an English thing. The second way is theocracy. No, that won't work because, again, the English are famously anti-clerical. We don't like clerical power. The third one might be a mafia rule, submitting to a mafia warlord. Again, the English are not really a very mafia-friendly people. Despised populations sometimes resort to mafia rule simply because they are despised, because they feel rejected. But in general, the English don't like mafia power. They don't like gangster power. What the English do like is quite aggressive, forceful systems of criminal law that vigorously suppress crime while leaving all the rest of us free to go about our business, particularly to make money. We like open, transparent, procedural law that we can understand and predict, and that leaves us free to go about our business honestly. In those circumstances, I think what will probably happen is you will get someone like me coming forward with a legal code. I've got this legal code, you can sign up to it as if you're signing up to membership of the club, and by doing so you agree to abide by the laws that are contained in this code of law. I've got a very functional basic code of laws that I put on my website. You can use it for free if the occasion ever comes to it, and in those circumstances I think people will grab at that. What I would say is you have to pay subscriptions in order to finance the enforcement mechanism, police, courts, judges, bailiffs, and those subscriptions enable that code of law to be enforced against you if you don't. So you can then go to people and say, listen, I can be enforced against if I break the law, therefore I'm safe to deal with. I think people will jump at a simple system of private law like that, which is like joining a club. And that is how I think people, certainly in England, will seek law privately. Okay, now the next one, that I think, now this one is a little hard to understand, but I think it makes perfect sense to me. That I think will lead to the separation of populations, particularly along ethnic lines. I would define ethnicity as being partway between race and culture. I don't think people self-consciously wake up in the morning and say, thank God I'm white. But on the other hand, I don't think it's just enough to enjoy warm beer or a certain brand of tea. I think it's ethnicity, which is a combination of the two. People who look, think, act and speak like you do and tend to have similar habits. And if people are clubbing together privately to seek law, people will seek to do so with other people of the same ethnicity. Now, I want to give you a thought experiment to explain this. Supposing I, as I've said, I come along and I say, I've got this code of law, pay your subscriptions and you can join it, and then you can go about your business and go about your life, be employed, make a bit of money and be safe and protected from crime and be protected against war from outsiders. So you get protection and you also can show that you are a law-abiding citizen. And supposing I say everyone is welcome, it doesn't matter what ethnicity or race or background you are from, anyone can join. Now supposing someone else comes along and says, hold on, let me just get rid of this. Supposing somebody else comes along and they say, I've got exactly the same code of law, you pay your subscriptions to join, but I will not allow, anyone can join this, or I will not allow the followers of the Islamic religion to join this code. So if you join this code, you live in an area or you live under a system that does not allow practitioners of Islam in it. Which of those systems will you join? Mine that allows anyone to come in, or the competitors which allows anyone except Muslims to join? Well, think about that. What reason, what incentive would you have to join a society, an area or a system that allows the practice of Islam and the practitioners of Islam within it? Muslims are, in general, on average, very highly criminalised. The prison numbers show that. I think it's about 3 to 3.5 times proportionately the numbers, quite a lot higher than that in Europe. There's also the crimes that are not getting enforced against, like the rape gangs. If you are a parent with young daughters, what incentive do you have to have Muslims living near you? What possible incentive is there for people to join a system that allows the practitioners of Islam within their system? And think about it, this is a system that's not free. You have to pay to join it. If you allow highly criminalized people into the same system as you, your subscriptions go up because you're going to have to employ more police, more courts, more judges, more prison cells, and you're going to have to pay more money simply for the privilege of being subjected to more crime by people who have a long-established religious bellicosity against you. What possible incentive is there? I can't see how you would join my happy hippie multicultural system. I think you would join the competitor system, which says, no, the practitioners of Islam are not allowed in here, because it will be much safer, much more peaceable, lower crime rates, and a lot cheaper to join. And also there'd be a sense of togetherness and familiarity, which I think would also blossom under such a system as people seek to reinforce the values that they voluntarily sign up to. Now, okay, so that's with the practitioners of Islam. I leave you with another thought experiment. Now suppose someone else comes along and they say, I will not allow I have the same code of laws, I will not allow the practitioners of Islam in, and I will not allow BLM populations in. I leave that to you as a thought experiment, bearing in mind the crime rates of those various groups. Which system will English people, ethnic English people, choose to join? I think you can guess. I think they will join the third one. That's my prediction. Okay. So I think a system of private law will lead to the separation out of populations and the grouping together of populations along ethnic lines. Remember, when law, being such a primary human need, is not something to gamble with. It is something that people will make very conservative decisions about, very hard-headed decisions about, and will not take risks over. And in general, because you are trusting other people not only to abide by the laws that are imposed, but to help to enforce them, but to play their part in financing the enforcement of those rules. You will not want to trust, you will only really want to trust people whom you trust. And that will tend to be people who look, think, act and speak like you. And I think that will mean the separation out of population along ethnic lines. So that's number 7. Number 8, that's feedback loops. I think that will, what I'm talking about there is that process of separation out along ethnic lines will reinforce itself hard. It will cement and harden and formalize the divisions between different populations along ethnic lines. And the sort of feedback loop I'm talking about goes like this. Let's suppose a quarter of the ethnic English population are die-hard multiculturalists, and they say, no, I don't care what you say, I'm going to go and join the multicultural area. I will sign up to the multicultural system of law. Well, multiculturalist, I would define a multiculturalist in general as someone who makes his money talking multiculturalism in order to enable himself to live away from multiculturalism. But if such a person then finds, if 25% of the ethnic English population are die-hard multiculturalists, they are then going to find themselves living in a population that is 4 times as multicultural, where the multicultural population is 4 times as concentrated. And I think then some of them, maybe half of them, will say, well, I didn't mind it when it was like before this system started, and it was a little bit multicultural, and I could live away from the multiculturalism. Now it's 4 times as multicultural, or it's 4 times as concentrated. That's too much for me. So half of them will then go and join the ethnic English area, and that means for the ones who remain, it's 8 times as multicultural. And then half of them will say, actually, no, it's 8 times as multicultural as it was. I feel really unsafe. I'm going to join the ethnic English area, and then it's 16 times as multicultural, and so on and so on. You get a feedback loop that hardens and really magnifies that sense of grouping together along ethnic lines, which I don't see how that is going to be avoided. And so what I think that will lead to is the balkanization, the ghettoization, the hardened formal ghettoization between different populations along those ethnic lines, and the enclaves forming in effect. And I think the enclaves in the foreign occupied, the non-English enclaves, the invader enclaves, if you want to call them that, I think conditions will plummet fast, very, very fast. The reason I think that is, well, if you imagine how many millions of third world migrants have come to the UK simply to sit high on the hog, working the welfare state. Probably quite a few millions. What will they do? Remember, the welfare state has fallen over. Remember I explained that? Sooty and sweep, you remember that? Okay, the welfare state has fallen over. They're not getting welfare. Suddenly, they then find themselves not getting any money, and then they are isolated, separated out from the ethnic English population. And how are they then going to make money? You can't drive taxis, you can't deliver kebabs to populations, to areas and populations that you are separated off from. Effectively, those foreign or invader populations will find themselves separated out and not able to earn a living. And in those areas, what happens if they can't pay for heating, for electricity, for water or drainage? Conditions in those foreign enclaves will become dire fast. And so that's number 9 there, dire conditions in enclaves. And I think at that stage, I would expect a lot of those people, whether they've been born in this country or not, simply to look around them and say, I'm in a disease-ridden hellhole here. I have no chance of earning a living. I don't like the weather. The people don't like me. And I might as well go to a country, the country of my grandparents, where at least I know I'll feel welcome and familiar, and I can at least survive, and the weather's a bit nicer. And then I think a lot of them will go voluntarily. I certainly think that many of them will be amenable to receiving a free airplane ticket home, maybe a little bit of cash. But I don't even think that will be necessary, because I think that will lead to point 10, and that is foreign populations simply being bought out. Imagine a foreign, say an Islamic enclave where people are living in those dire conditions. That land, the land in those enclaves, will pass from the low bidder to the high bidder, that's what always happens with territory, with land, with any asset. Someone to whom it is worth more comes along and pays more money and buys it. And that is what I think will happen. And the English are, or the British, I would say the English, are the most entrepreneurial. History shows us to be the most entrepreneurial people in the world, bar none. Look at the history of capitalism, the Industrial Revolution. We are the most entrepreneurial people in the world. And so left to our own devices, I can see us actually being pretty good at making money. And you'll simply get business people going to whatever corrupt mullah is the landlord of a certain block of territory in that Islamic enclave and saying, you own an acre of urban land, it's worth £100 million to me, I'll give you £100,000. That isn't much money, but that's a good deal to you given where you're living in this enclave. And if you go back to Afghanistan or Somalia, you can live like a god on £100,000, so take the money. And so piece by piece, I think those foreign enclaves will get bought out. That is how I think it will be completed. But I think the bulk of the population will go once they are separated out, because I think most of those the mass immigrant population are not going to be able to survive very comfortably at all once they are cut off, separated out from the rest of the English population, which I think is likely to happen of its own accord, simply by people doing what they want to do, being left to their own devices, left to make their own decisions and to vote with their feet. So where are we on that first row? That's the question. The big question is, where are we on that with that first domino in that row of 10 dominoes? That's economic breakdown. Let me just bring this up. This is the chart of inflation in America. And this is what everyone's talking about in the economic news at the moment. So you see from February 2021, just over a year ago, I took this. This is a news story from February 2022. I deliberately took it. This is before the Ukraine war, because I wanted to show that this is not being caused by the Ukraine war. This is being caused by the money printing that occurred during coronavirus. I want to go into that in a bit more detail. But inflation is has gone from about 1.5%. In February 2022, it was 8.1%. So it has risen. Right now, it's at about 9%. So the bulk of that inflation curve rose before the Ukraine war. That is a high level of inflation. I don't think we are. You can find articles online that say everything's going to break down tomorrow. I don't think that's the case. I think what we are seeing is a gradual turnaround away from low inflation, low interest rates towards higher, gradually higher inflation and higher interest rates. I want to show you that inflation curve. That's from right up to date, or I think the 26th of April, that story. That shows I think it's 8.3 in April. That shows the inflation rate compared to the last 20 years. So it is currently pretty high. I think that will probably come down. I don't think it will come all the way down, but I think it will come down. I think there are there are deflationary forces and inflationary forces. The inflationary forces are all the money printing that went on under coronavirus, and also the deglobalization as a result of reducing some of our links with China as a result of the coronavirus, and also as a result of the Ukraine war. That deglobalization means that ultra cheap products from around the world, that's going to get a bit more restricted. Things will start to cost more. So that's inflationary forces. I think the deflationary forces are the massive amounts of debt in the economy. Debt tends to crush activity in the economy. Also, I think the stock market is going to fall further, and that will reduce demand, that will reduce people's willingness to spend. So probably what I think that means is stagflation. I would expect probably what we're likely to see is an increase in what we saw during coronavirus, which is quite a sharp recession. Then the government prints money, gets the economy going again. That creates inflation and an increase in interest rates, which then creates recession, so it goes down again. Government prints more money, sprays it into the economy, then that creates more inflation, higher interest rates. So increasing that cycle, the amplitude and frequency of that cycle, I think that is what we're looking at. And on average, if you're able to draw a straight line along that undulating curve, that we will see increasing interest rates, slowly, gradually increasing rates of inflation. I don't think that's going to break down tomorrow. I feel very hesitant giving a timeline. This is where I risk making a fool of myself, but I need to give some kind of timeline just to show where I think we are. I think probably the cracks in the economy will become sort of apparent to people, or impossible to paper over after about the middle of this decade, maybe 2026, 2027, and then another 5 years after that before those economic effects translate into political effects. So the gradual breakdown of state authority. It's always very dangerous to give a timeline. You can predict what's going to happen. It's really difficult to predict when it's going to happen. So if you're smart, if you're cautious, maybe you'll take my timeline and double it. That wouldn't be a dumb thing to do at all. The key point is I don't think the economy is going to break down the day after tomorrow. I think it is, at the moment, a fairly slow up and down process towards that. Just so you know, I'm not certain that that breakdown would necessarily, in the long term, be such a bad thing. The evidence from history, from Germany after World War II, from the new economic policy in Lenin's Russia. The evidence is that when the state gets its corrupting fingers out of the pie grows very fast. The economy grows extremely. Hong Kong is another example. If government keeps its fingers out of the pie, that pie grows extremely fast, and it catches up very quick, faster than you can starve. It grows again faster than you can starve. So I am not sure that it will be such a bad thing. I said what I think is the bad thing is the reliance on welfare that has been so ruthlessly encouraged by politicians and that we have accepted, which has put us in this dangerous position. What I think is causing the change now, and that has occurred since the coronavirus stimulus money, is that the model of government printing and spending has changed. Previously, to put it really in a really basic, simple way, previously what happened is government would print up a load of money and then make it available to banks, big banks, to borrow and then to lend to businesses who would borrow it from the banks. So it was the model was one of printing and lending. That, during coronavirus, changed to, I think, to a model of printing and spending, where the central banks, the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve in America, they print up the money and then they would lend it to central government, who would then spend it with stimulus checks, handouts to people, payments directly into people's bank accounts, or furlough payments, so people could sit at home and get paid, which a lot of people certainly told me that they enjoyed. And that was very popular at the time. And that I want to show you, if I show you this, that is a graph showing the money printing in by the Federal Reserve, and you see that big uptick there, or that big leg up there. That was the coronavirus spending under Trump, and then since then, that's the stimulus spending under Biden. And what I think happened is that under Trump, when that money was printed, lent to government, and government then gave it to people in the form of stimulus checks, that was what has sometimes been referred to as modern monetary theory, or magic money tree, where you print money and you give it to people to spend. And that has been shown, it has been tried and tested and failed because of the inflation that it created. That is what created this inflation there that I showed you. And but that is going to continue. I don't think we're going to see a return to what happened in 2008 or 2010, 2012, where central banks print money and bail out the commercial banks with it by making it available for those banks to borrow. It was incredibly unpopular at the time. I think what we're going to see is more of this failed policy, this inflationary policy of printing money and giving it direct to people, putting it in their bank accounts, because it is politically popular. I want to give you a couple of examples of this. Here is I want to show you this video. This is a video from a former editor of the Times. Hold on while I back up a bit. This fella here, former editor of the Times.
My proposal, which is Keynes's proposal, is that the money should be given to people, not to businesses. Simply put the money into people's bank accounts. Give them £500 as a Christmas bonus, give them £1,000 as a Christmas bonus. They've done it in the Far East, the Americans did it through a scrappage scheme. You can do this. It just hasn't happened.
There you see how what a nice man he seems, how pleased he seems to be able to say that, yes, give the money to people, give people a Christmas bonus. Isn't that nice? Yes. And on the other hand, well, and he also wrote for The Guardian saying, we should cash bomb the people, not the banks. That was in 2014. Isn't that nice? I'd like to be cash bombed. Now, if you want to see the other side of that, cash bombing the banks, look at this this nobody from 2010, can't remember his name. Okay, listen to what he had to say. Hold on.
It was not easy to do. And if there's one thing that has unified Democrats and Republicans, and everybody in between, it's that we all hated the bank bailout. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it, you hated it. It was about as popular as a root canal.
Okay, he's an empty suit, but he's opportunistic. He knows what was popular. He knows that bailing out banks was unpopular. And that is why, in large part, that is why I think if the current inflation turns into recession, I think we're going to get more money printing and giving it to people to spend, cash bombing the people. And that, I think, will be part of this upward curve in inflation and interest rates, which will collapse the debt bubble, which will then create economic breakdown, which is the first of those 10 dominoes that I showed you. And another reason is simply that the people are aware of the level of fraud that occurs when you try to bail out businesses, rather than just giving it direct to people. I'll show you this Bill Maher video, a new rule, American Kleptocracy, real time with Bill Maher. It's quite a fun one to watch. I haven't got time to play all of it, but I'll just play the last bit to show you what he has to say about it.
So by way of analogy, let's return to our friend in aisle 3 at the Walgreens. Okay, the Walgreens, that's the United States government. And aisle 3, that's the $5.7 trillion in COVID relief. And this guy's shoveling it into a bag and walking out. That's all the boondogglers and con men in America who fleeced the system. And this security guard who's just watching it, that's your congressman.
Bailing out banks, bailing out businesses, that is politically unpopular. Bailing out people is politically very popular. But it will lead to economic breakdown. I think it will lead to economic breakdown, and that seems to me to be the first in that list of that string, that row of 10 dominoes that I outlined there. I'll leave that as an end screen if I can on the YouTube video. But that, I hope I've been clear in showing what I think is likely to happen. Thank you.